For Crema Media's Polity, I'm Sane Dlamini, ANC struggle icon and former IEC chair Dr. Brigalia Bam joins me to discuss her Ubuntu Lifetime Achievement in Diplomacy Award. Dr. Bam, you also feel strongly that the electoral system should be changed. Why is that?
I do, but I need to say before I express the change is that we had adopted the system. I think people don't know the history because at a given time in history we didn't know each other. We didn't have opportunities, we had been separated to Bantu homelands. Our organizations politically were liberation movements. So we came into the field of politics, democracy, with all our divisions. And so we needed a system where we would rely entirely on a political party making decisions of choosing representatives on our part. And that is our history. Now it is clear, amazingly so, that we are so mature. We are actually ahead of this electoral system that we adopted at a particular time for particular reasons. South Africans, I can assure you, whether you are talking of South Africans in urban areas, whether you are talking of South Africans where I come from originally in a rural area, they want to decide for themselves who should be their counselor. They want themselves to set the criteria of the standards and the expectations of that person who is taking care of their area. They also want to be consulted. They also want to know basic things. How much money do we have in this particular area? And how is that budget going to be spent? It's as simple as all that. And that's all people want. And that is why the protests are a sign. The protests to us are a sign that people want to participate, that people want to accountability, not accountability to the party. Because in the present system now is that you are in a position you are holding either in parliament or a position you are holding as a councillor. You are not chosen by the people of that area, you are chosen by the party. And I think that has to change. We cannot, the future generation will not accept that. And they have got certain standards that they want to set for themselves.
As a former Chancellor of Walter Sisulu University, what would you say is key in making sure that our universities and even higher learning institutions adequately prepare students for the working world?
The first thing I think, which is very important, too important for words, is that political parties in South Africa and trade union movements must begin to respect and not influence in any way the operations in our universities. At present, there is a lot of interference from politicians of all kinds, manipulation of students who are studying in our university along political lines has got to stop. Because students have always been active in politics. That is not something new. But we are now introducing a system where the students are almost wanting to run a university and interfere in issues of governance, in issues of research. What do they know about that? And so that the institutions of learning must remain what they are. They are intended to do a number of things. One, to give skills to the future South Africa, to give education to the future South Africa, to give values to the future South Africa, to create citizens who will be able to serve this country. They are not there to create politicians who are going to do that. That's very important. The second most important thing that is to happen to our universities is the protection of students, especially women students, from all forms of violation and exploitation. The tradition has changed. The young women students are no more feeling safe at university because the culture of respect for young women who have got to be scholars. We need to affirm more and more women to become mothers who are educated, to become mothers who have skills, because they also need to be part of this society. The days of women staying at home, bringing up children are over, not a woman of the 21st century. So in the university has got to create an environment that makes it possible for that. Thirdly, the university students must also begin themselves to find very positive, creative ways of how they do their own political work. There are ways of doing creative political work without interfering with, and it is up to them to be able to do that for their own safety and for their own good. Universities must be safe places. It's always shocking when we hear stories that people are breaking into universities. And so this violence and this attitude of, it has got to remain a sacred place. Yes, I'm not saying a place that is unfriendly, but a place where everybody looks forward to going. And in my opinion is that people who should go to university are those people who are inclined to do academic work. And people who have gifts of certain gifts in academic work. I think there is a tendency that everybody who doesn't even have the ability or the inclination or the interest of simple doing other professions and acquiring other skills, which can always be acquired outside university. So we need to, it is not only the universities, but we need to begin to bring new respect and honor to the work people do with their hands. Artisanship has got to be given the honor. We must be proud of our electricians. You must be very proud of those people who are working in tapestry, people who are working with their hands, doing woodwork. Do you know that in this country we don't even have many factories that are managed by young people because they don't have a skill. They can't even they don't know how a table is made. We have then many, many women who are relying entirely on buying everything they wear. It has got to come from China overseas because they can't sit down even to cut a pattern for a child. What kind of society where everybody has to have a degree and you don't have anyone who has got skills? It won't work. So I think we also need to look at why people think that your appreciation of your education has got to be associated with a university. And that's a new thinking we have to. How do we bring the dignity which is there in other countries? I lived in Switzerland, and so having been there for 21 years of my life, where the skills are more important than your degree. It's a country where you can't just be proud because you have a gown. It's a country where you are proud because you have a skill. And it's a very different attitude. A skill that you are trained in is more important than you having just a degree in geography. Not that they stop you from having a degree in geography. Yes, if that's what you want, and decide how you are going to use that. So I think we need a mindset to change.
And lastly, your political party or the political party that you are affiliated to, the African National Congress, is dealing with a lot of issues such as corruption and gender-based violence. What would you say to the leadership of the ruling African National Congress?
I am reluctant to say I'm speaking as ANC person because with my work, where I have worked with all the parties, I have developed great love for all the parties. And so I would rather talk really about the government, which is the government of the African National Congress, and the government I fully support, and say that maybe we need, after 25 years, to find ways and means in which we involve people who are not in government to join hands in a recreation. I call it recreation because it's already there, of the democracy of what we call the new South Africa. It seems though, when we talk about values in ours, you can't expect the government to bring up everybody to be forthright. People learn to be corrupt somewhere. They are not taught by government. People learn to be the values of not stealing the money that belongs to other people. They come from your home. They come from the way you are brought up. They've got to come from another institution. We cannot expect the government to be suddenly creating people themselves who are educated. The issues of education and of bringing up children, in some schools now there's something new which was never there in the olden days, the violence. We can't blame the government for that. And so we need other institutions. We need the civil society to be able to support government actively, to do a number of things and support the government rather than rely on everything to be done by the government. And really, this is the only way, which means the time has come for the government to identify institutions as they do in other countries. For instance, in other countries, you find that there are institutions who are concentrating on nursery schools, children's infants, education for development. It is not done by government. It is not done by councillors because they don't have the skill for that. But the government gives money which they must account for. And then in other countries, you have institutions that are dealing with poverty because you can't expect a councillor to be able to manage the poverty programs in an area where they are working. They don't have the skill for that. They don't have they don't have the ability. And so it is high time that we identify very seriously a number of institutions and create them if they are not there, who are going to be doing a lot of things with the money coming from government. You cannot expect a non-governmental organization these days to be fundraising money. It is very difficult from companies, and they are the ones who must create schools for children to learn. And so we need to rethink and look at some. We will not be able to take everything from government, of course, but there are things, poverty programs work, and in some other areas you find that hospitals that are government hospitals are not managed by government people. They are managed by another institution. In the olden days, for instance, some of the hospitals were managed by the church. And it still happens in other countries. That is managing, but they get a government subsidy, but they are the ones who manage that. And so they are a lot, rather than expect the government to be managing each and every, the department is managing each and every clinic, it's managing each and every, whatever you call it. How do they know that in place A, there are people who don't know how to plow fields? How is the government going to do that? And so for us to look at the schemes, what that were called agricultural schemes, which are not entirely, but working with government. And the government will know that. And the money, by the way, which is very interesting in other countries, where I was working with some of these projects myself, is that the people who account for the money are trained people and are paid by government, so that the money is accounted for, tax money. And that's one very important thing that has got to be done. The government doesn't just hand in money to a group as it is now, and the group, and the money is misused. A lot of money that goes to a number of places is not accounted for because people don't have to account. After all, I'm appointed in this position by my party. So I'm going to spend the money the way I like. And if the Auditor General comes, well, it's too bad. It's only now that we are beginning to change and give power to that. And so we need to look. This is my own, and I feel, because I've seen it work in other countries, I'm not talking about something that is something in the cloud. It has been done in the country. In fact, when you look at the history of some of the countries after the wars in their countries, is that the government doesn't try to reconstruct. It's given to many, and the government has a major responsibility of providing the money, either from other governments or money, of tax money. That doesn't become the responsibility of an NGO to write for funds and ask the German people for money, and the money comes to a country from another government. It doesn't happen like that anymore. So I think these are really new things we should begin to talk about.
That was Ubuntu Lifetime Achievement in Diplomacy Award recipient Dr. Brigalia Bam in conversation with Polity.